Where I want to spend the rest of our time is with three words: servant, the second word, slave, the third word, ransom. Because we want to learn humility and this way of humility. So the first thing that strikes me in this passage as I look at Jesus' description, he doesn't critique wanting to be great. So if you want to be great in your life, have a seat. Jesus is going to tell us how to be great. He doesn't critique you and I wanting to be first. Who doesn't want to be first? But the way he's going to unfold this catches us off guard. The Apostle Paul wrote these words in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 25. He says, "The foolishness of God is wiser than the wisest human." And then he says, "The weakness of God is stronger than human strength." And you're like, what is he talking about? What we are seeing in this passage is an example of this upside down kingdom that Jesus is giving us. So for all of you who want to be great, here's what Jesus says. You need to be the servant of all. You need to be a servant. The Greek word is diakone. And diakone literally means to serve tables. So, are you ready for that? Do you want to be great? What it means is that you and I are going to be serving other people. When you read in the text that the Gentiles, the rulers of the Gentiles, lord it over, it actually has the connotation of Greek of sitting upon somebody. In other words, it's keeping somebody down so that you can remain on top. But God doesn't want that. He wants you to be building up other people, enabling other people. I have found in my ministry years that the Lord has had certain pivotal moments to teach me lessons about this. So one of the lessons he taught me, I can tell you the date. It was December 14, 2008. Now, how can I know the date so specifically? It's because of what happened, obviously, on that day. Well, if you recall back in history, the United States turned into an economic downturn. But as a church, we were thriving. Our services were filled, and we were blessed. Well, on this particular Sunday, the New York Times showed up at the middle service of the Manhasset campus. Not only did the New York Times show up along with their photographer, but there was an author who independently came to write a story about multi-site churches. Both the writer and the reporter ended up sitting on the exact same row of seats, and they were at the same service. Now, on that particular day, I was not preaching. Now, I want to show you this picture because the New York Times put us on the front cover. Now, if you want to look this up, you can look it up. I looked it up today to see if it's still there. Just type in New York Times Shelter Rock Church, and you can see the article. And this picture shows up in the article. Now, you can see a younger Steve there worshiping with his hands up. In fact, there must have been some great worship music. It's like the whole room is filled with hands lifted in worship. But you'll see there's a young man next to me. His name is Matt, 21 years old. He was the one preaching that day. And you know what? The reporter, the writer, they took note that this church, whose average age was probably late 40s or maybe early 50s, had a 21-year-old preaching the sermon. And Matt went on to become a phenomenal servant of the Lord. In fact, he's published musics that he has written. He's a pastor, a worship pastor. God has done phenomenal things through this young man. But here's what the Lord told me on that day. Because in all honesty, my flesh was bothering me. Why wasn't I preaching when the New York Times came, when this author came? Because the Lord said, Steve, because your job as a pastor is to lift other people up. It's not to press down on them, but to serve them so that they too can spread their wings and fly. Which is why even to this day, we are now developing under Pastor Henry a school of theology, why we've had a class on preaching to develop young preachers and to enable them to use their skill. That's why from time to time on a Sunday morning, you'll see a young preacher get up, somebody who's not had much experience. We are seeking to allow them their chance to fly, which means that we who are the professionals take a step back. We don't tap people down. We enable people to serve as we ourselves serve them. So that's the first word I'm wanting to look at. Are you willing to enable people to grow and serve them? Wait on their table so that you can reflect the humility of Jesus. But let's go to the next word, slave.